When my wife approached me with a request that I give her permission to cheat on me once, I flew into a rage. I was so shocked that I didn't know how to react. How can you, after 21 years of living together, come up with such statements? All I knew was that a very drastic decision had to be made immediately. I should have foreseen it. Life seemed too idyllic, especially in that moment. It was a Friday evening during a delightful summer day. My Corona was refreshingly cold as it glided down my throat. The Cubs were dominating the Cardinals on the large screen, leading 7-2 in the fifth inning. My loyal German shepherd, Rice, was nestled beside my lazy boy, mostly asleep, only stirring slightly when I cheered for the Cubs' success. Apart from the television and my sporadic bursts of excitement, the house was serene. My wife of 21 years, Tracy, was visiting a neighbor, while my 18-year-old son and 17-year-old daughter were both spending the night at friends' homes. It was just me, the dog, the cubbies, and a case of Corona in the fridge. Oh, and some limes. I rarely bothered with them, but I grabbed a couple earlier in the day upon learning I'd have the evening to myself, treating myself right. I heard the front screen door open and close, assuming it was my wife returning from visiting her longtime friend Lisa. Although I heard movement in the front of the house, I noticed she didn't greet me as usual, which struck me as odd. However, my attention shifted when Cubs manager David Ross made a controversial decision, leading me to erupt in anger and once again disturb the dog. It took at least 5 minutes before Tracy finally entered the family room. She seemed contemplative, perhaps anxious. Instead of coming over for our customary kiss, she sat on the edge of the sofa beside my chair. "Can we talk for a minute, Bob?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the television. Her words grabbed my full attention. "Of course, Blondie," I replied. I observed a faint layer of perspiration on her forehead and noticed her breathing was irregular. I pondered whether someone we knew was unwell or had passed away. "Could you turn off the TV, Bob?" she requested, her fists clenching and unclenching. Turning off the TV during a Cubs game? She understood the significance of her request. It had to be something serious, not just illness, but death. A sense of unease settled in my stomach. I reached for the remote and silenced the television. "What's wrong, honey? You don't seem well. Has someone passed away?" I inquired. "Oh God, no. Nobody has died," she responded quickly. "It's just that this is incredibly important to me, and I need to ensure you're fully attentive." I nodded silently, my mind swamped with troubling thoughts. We locked eyes for what felt like an eternity. Fear was evident in her gaze along with something else, perhaps anger. "You know I love you completely, and I would never betray you, never be unfaithful with another man, right?" This wasn't the question I had anticipated. Suddenly, the dinner I had earlier in the evening and the 2 beers I drank during the game seemed to be threatening to resurface right there on the family room floor. I nodded silently once more. "I'm 45, Bob. Besides you, I've only been with one other man in my entire life," she began. I still turn heads. My friends even call me a hot MILF. I want to be with another man just once, to experience the excitement of someone new, someone different, before we grow old together. What in the world? I remained motionless for. I couldn't discern how long. It was as though a rushing train whizzed by my ears. No, absolutely not. I shouted as I leaped from my seat. "This won't happen while I'm still breathing." She observed me with wide eyes as I paced to and fro. It felt like a terrible dream. Perhaps I had dozed off in my chair and entered into a nightmare. "This isn't about you and me, Bob. It's about me. My personal needs transcending you and our family," she asserted, her voice gaining strength with each word. "I believe I've been a devoted wife and mother all these years. I've always prioritized the family, but now, just this once, I need to do something for myself. I need to feel like a confident, desirable woman in control of her life. Do you not feel desirable with me?" I inquired, realizing I sounded pathetic. "I express my love for you constantly. I believe I consistently make you feel desired. I still crave you, and I don't think I'm subtle about it. You do, and I appreciate that, but this is about something else. I still crave validation for my ego, from men other than you, Bob. It's gratifying to be noticed by other men. It's exhilarating to imagine that another man desires me in that way. Doesn't it make you feel good when you catch a woman looking at you or flirting with you? I'm not unlike anyone else. I enjoy being looked at, desired. And after all this time, I desire no more than that. I yearn for the experience of going out on a date, being treated to dinner and wine, then pursued and desired by a different man, just for one night. Not love, just desire one night. Then I would return home to you and be yours. Be a devoted wife and mother for the rest of my days. You're far from just a devoted wife and mother to me, Blondie, I countered. You're my everything. I can't bear the thought of you being with another man. I refuse to let you go to another man. You keep saying you love me. Why not demonstrate your love by granting me this? I know it's a lot to ask, perhaps the biggest ask, and it would mean everything to me if you were to allow it, she insisted. No, it would be the ultimate foolishness for me to agree to that. If you truly loved me, you wouldn't have even brought it up, I replied. Haven't I been a decent husband to you and a good father to our children? Shouldn't that earn me some leeway too? But you had so many more partners than I did before we got married. I'm just trying to level the playing field a bit, she reasoned. Actually, we never discussed numbers before we got married. All we really talked about was our mutual belief in fidelity after marriage. And just so you know, I've only been intimate with 4 women in my life, including you, so it's not exactly a long list, I explained. Oh, I always assumed you had much more experience than me, she admitted. You seem to know so much more than I do. I've done a lot of reading on the subject. I want to make you happy in every way I can. So you're still firmly against it then, she inquired. Not only am I firmly against it, but I'll be contacting a lawyer first thing Monday morning to begin divorce proceedings, I declared, noting the shock on her face. But, she stuttered. I understand this must have been difficult for you to ask for, which tells me you're serious about it. That also tells me you won't give up easily, I said. It means you might eventually try to do it behind my back. I no longer trust you not to, unless you've already done so. And this is just a way to seek permission after the fact. No, I swear I haven't been with anyone else. I promised I wouldn't cheat on you, and I meant it, she pleaded. But now that I know you want to, you might see it as not cheating since you've asked, I stated, locking eyes with her. Her avoidance of eye contact conveyed all the information I needed. Are you really willing to tear apart our family even though I haven't done anything yet? She questioned, her voice hoarse. If you've mustered the courage to ask, it suggests you've been contemplating this for a while. And that indicates you already have someone in mind. Perhaps he's been involved in the planning too. Lunches, dinners. Emotionally, you've already betrayed me. By the way, who is he? I inquired. I didn't have anyone specific in mind, she replied, her gaze fixed on a spot on the wall behind me. The silence stretched for about 15 seconds as I bore into her with my stare. She flushed crimson when she met my eyes, registering my disbelief. You don't need to know, Bob, she murmured. Technically, no, I don't. But I'm curious about the man who's dismantling what I thought was a strong marriage. You can tell me, or I can reach out to all your close friends, your boss, and every coworker, I threatened. Her jaw dropped in astonishment. You wouldn't, she began. Wouldn't I? What do I have left to lose? My life's already in shambles, my marriage shattered. A little embarrassment hardly matters to me. What about my embarrassment? She exclaimed. I shrugged and made an effort to conceal my smile. What's your name? I inquired sternly. Dan. Dan Wilson, she responded softly. Please, Bob, don't harm him. I make no promises. I reached for the remote and resumed the game. She huffed, holding back tears, got up from the couch, and headed upstairs to our bedroom. I sat glued to the Cubs game, but my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't recall what aired on TV afterward, but I remained in front of the screen for at least another 2 hours. Despite my efforts to conceal my emotions from my wife, the truth was I felt utterly devastated. I had no inkling that she was contemplating being unfaithful. Looking back, I realize I should have noticed signs of her discontent with me or our life together. Over the past 3 months, Tracy had grown increasingly distant not only from me, but also from our children. In fact, it was our daughter Sherry who first observed it, asking if Tracy and I had been in some sort of disagreement. The closeness between us seemed to have diminished, I observed. Our frequency of sexual intimacy, which used to be 2 or 3 times a week, had decreased to once every other week, despite my efforts. I began to wonder if she might be experiencing some early changes. Furthermore, there were instances of her taking phone calls outside of the room, which was a new behavior, along with nearly constant late-night texting. When I asked about it, she attributed it to Lisa, who supposedly was dealing with issues in her marriage with Jerry. This intrigued me because Jerry and Lisa lived just 3 doors down from us, and I had no idea they were encountering any problems. Over the weekend, I dedicated considerable thought to my available choices. I informed Tracy of my intention to initiate divorce proceedings promptly, but before doing so, I needed to thoroughly evaluate every aspect of my marriage and family. It wasn't difficult to comprehend why other men might be attracted to Tracy. I first met her when we were both 21, and even at 45, she had only gained 10 pounds, despite having 2 children. Her attractive figure, complemented by ample breasts and a firm buttocks, along with her youthful appearance, made her seem closer to 35. I often pondered how I ended up with Tracy, considering she was clearly out of my league. Although I'm not unattractive, standing at 5'11" and weighing 175 pounds, men like me don't typically end up with someone who was the prom queen just 3 years prior in high school. Our paths crossed in an astronomy class at Purdue University during our junior year. While I was taking it for enjoyment, Tracy needed it to fulfill her science requirement. Being somewhat of a geek, I was more than willing to assist her in passing the class, knowing that science wasn't her forte. As the first semester drew to a close, we found ourselves studying in my dorm room when Tracy suddenly leaned in and kissed me passionately. I reciprocated the kiss with equal intensity. "Damn, for most of the semester I thought you were gay," Tracy remarked after we broke the kiss. "No matter what I did, you never seemed interested." I was definitely interested, but I had no clue it was mutual. "I was just trying my best not to drool over you," I replied. We immediately entered into an exclusive relationship. My bed experience was limited, but it seemed to be even more important to her, as she never complained and seemed to enjoy everything I tried in bed, thanks to my extensive reading on the subject. While my peers were interested in adult films, I studied the depicted actions. This knowledge proved useful to Tracy from the very beginning. During our second love act, I was able to make her lose consciousness with my language technique. When she regained consciousness 2 minutes later, all she could say was, "I love you, Bob." 2 years after we graduated, we got married. 3 years later, our son was born, followed by our daughter. Financially, we were doing well. I worked in it, and she was a banker when she returned to work after our youngest started school. Our son was preparing to start his freshman year at Ohio State in a couple of months, while our daughter was about to enter her senior year of high school. In just 2 years, we would be empty nesters. We've been talking about our future plans, including travel, for the past few months. I had been in love with this woman for nearly 23 years. On one hand, ending it all because she requested permission to cheat seemed overly severe, but on the other hand, her reaching the point of asking was a significant issue. I wasn't naive. I understood that if she was desperate enough to seek permission to cheat, she might resort to doing so behind my back, especially since she disclosed it to me and didn't perceive it as cheating, though I did. Moreover, there was the issue of her already engaging in an emotional affair with Dan Wilson and planning this act of physical infidelity together. Could I ever forgive that? I immediately contacted a divorce attorney on Monday morning and scheduled an appointment for that Thursday afternoon. Meanwhile, Tracy attempted to convince me against filing for divorce. "We haven't done anything, Bob." "We won't," Tracy pleaded. "Is it because you genuinely don't want a divorce, or because you know it's wrong?" I inquired. She avoided eye contact and remained silent. "You're still hoping I'll change my mind and allow it, aren't you?" Her hopeful expression sadly confirmed our inevitable fates. I had Tracy served with divorce papers a week after meeting with my attorney. We resided in a no-fault state and had similar incomes, simplifying the financial aspects. With the children nearly grown, arrangements would be made gradually, with the non-custodial parent responsible for child support for a year. The plan was to sell the house and divide the proceeds, wrapping up our 21-year marriage. However, things didn't proceed as smoothly as anticipated. Tracy retained a skilled attorney who persuaded the judge to mandate 4 counseling sessions, with the possibility of more if deemed necessary. The counselor, a woman in her mid-30s, shared the viewpoint of my children and Tracy. If my wife hadn't committed adultery, why was divorce deemed necessary by me? I relayed to the counselor the same sentiment I shared with Tracy and my children, that I viewed her proposition for extramarital relations as a breach of our marital vows. As a result, I no longer felt I could trust her as my spouse. Though I may still harbor some love for her, I couldn't remain married to someone I couldn't trust. But I won't ever entertain such an idea again, Bob. I only need you. Please, she implored repeatedly throughout the majority of 2 counseling sessions. You're set in your decision, aren't you, Mr. Rasmussen? Your conviction is clear in your ease, remarked the counselor toward the conclusion of the 2nd session. I will cease prolonging this charity and advise the judge to proceed with the divorce unimpeded. While my personal opinion holds no weight, I'll offer it nonetheless. I believe you're making a grave error here. Your wife hasn't engaged in infidelity, at least not physically, so it appears that marriage counseling would be welcome to salvage your long-standing relationship. Your wife appears willing to make any concessions necessary to preserve your marriage and your family. I admit I grimaced inside. My affection for Tracy runs deep. This decision wasn't made lightly. Dr. Baker, there's a disparity in our perspectives. You labeled it a concession, but I don't see her commitment to fidelity as such. It's about honoring the vows we exchanged 21 years ago, vowed she conspired to violate with another man, I clarified. The news of our divorce sent my in-laws into a frenzy. The day after Tracy informed them, my mother-in-law phoned me and launched into a tirade, hurling insults for a solid 15 minutes without pause, starting the moment I answered. My father-in-law, usually the voice of reason, wrested the phone from her midst her continued shouting. She never even betrayed you, and you're ending it after 21 years? Are you out of your mind, Bob? He bellowed. The following week, I relocated to a nearby 2-bedroom apartment, while my daughter chose to remain with my wife until she started college the following year. I thought the extra room might prove useful if either of the kids wanted to stay over. Despite understanding my reasons for divorcing their mother, both children were upset with me. A few days after moving into my new place, I had a cordial phone chat with my neighbor Jerry. I let him know that his wife Lisa seemed to have played a role in my wife's plans with Dan Wilson, and Tracy had mentioned that there were issues between Jerry and Lisa. I assured Jerry that I didn't suspect him of being involved in the breakdown of my marriage, but it seemed like Lisa might have had a hand in it. Oh damn, Jerry muttered on the phone. So you're saying I might be in trouble too? Does your lawyer offer group discounts? The rise of social media has its pros and cons. For me, a positive was that I could gather plenty of information about Dan Wilson without needing a private investigator, saving me a lot of money. Wilson, a colleague of Lisa's, had moved to our local office from Cleveland around 6 months before my marriage fell apart. It seemed he was trying to arrange something with my wife for when he was in town, so he could have a warm welcome in both places. I wondered if Tracy was even aware of Wilson's fiancée. That was all in the past now, except for the call I made to Wilson's fiancée. Soon after, I received word from several sources that Dan's wedding had been called off. His fiancée expressed that he was free to be with his old lady full-time. Did I mention that his fiancée was the daughter of a very wealthy man? 2 weeks before my divorce was finalized marked my 22nd anniversary with Tracy. I couldn't deny the pain of what I had lost, but as I sat in front of my Swanson TV dinner, the more convinced I became that I was making the right choice for myself. Remaining married would have meant a lifetime of suspicion and searching for signs of her infidelity. I was certain, deep down, that she would inevitably find a way to betray me. She couldn't stand losing and would view not getting her way as a defeat that needed correcting. I took a sip of single malt and retired to bed by 10 p.m. Happy anniversary to me. At about 1 o'clock in the morning, my phone rang, and I realized that my future ex-wife was calling. At first, I wanted to transfer the call to voicemail, but decided to answer because I was already awake. She was moaning and breathing heavily, clearly in the midst of lovemaking. Familiar with these sounds, I knew she wasn't faking it. Despite wanting to hang up, I found I couldn't move while listening to Tracy encouraging her partner, presumably Wilson. I stayed on the line for another 2 minutes, long enough to hear them finish. I wished I had a landline phone so she could hear the phone clap. All my doubts about our impending divorce disappeared at that moment. Following the advice of my lawyer, I had developed a habit of recording all conversations with my wife. As I sat there, my nerves on edge, I dialed my in-law's number. When my father-in-law answered, I played back the 3-minute recording for him before ending the call. I was confident there would be no repeat performances of that unpleasant exchange in the future. Unlike my wife, I didn't seek solace in the company of others until after the divorce was finalized. Even then, it was over a year before I took another woman to bed. Admittedly, my social life suffered. It had been 24 years since my last date, and with no intention of dating again, I hadn't kept up with the scene. That turned out to be a grave mistake, as the dating world had evolved rapidly, leaving me behind. I acknowledged that part of my hesitation to date stemmed from fear. I dreaded the possibility of another emotional blow. I had loved Tracy deeply, and her betrayal blindsided me completely, without even a hint of warning. One noticeable change I observed since my last stint in the dating world was the shift in women's attitudes. Back then, it was typically one-sided. The man took the lead, choosing who to pursue, asking them out, planning the date, and footing the bill. Nowadays, it seems like women are taking on more assertive roles in dating, sometimes initiating the pursuit themselves and having opinions on how the date should unfold. They even occasionally contribute financially. At times, I felt like a relic, trying to keep up with the pace of modern dating dynamics. Being back in the dating scene revealed to me that Tracy's sudden selfishness wasn't an anomaly. Alongside this newfound empowerment, women in today's dating scene appear to be more focused on themselves. Many prioritize their own desires, sometimes at the expense of their partners. It's a me-first mentality that I've encountered all too frequently, and it's a recent development that I've witnessed firsthand. I will not complain about the physical side of intimacy with a 20-year-old woman. Of course, it was quite intense at first, and I thought I might have strained a couple of muscles. But once I adjusted to the physical demands, the pleasure became incredible. I don't want to discredit Tracy's abilities in bed, but at 45, she couldn't match the energy and flexibility of a young woman. Admittedly, I didn't have the stamina of a young man either, but I made up for it with my tongue and finger skills, which was my forte. However, I was not only interested in younger partners. I've had women between the ages of 25 and 55. I can say that I am open to all ages. However, I usually gravitated towards the women of my age with whom I felt most comfortable. After enduring a challenging week, I concluded a meeting with a new client situated on the distant side of town. Still dressed in my business suit, I decided to make a pit stop at the bar of a posh hotel restaurant. Perched on a tall stool, I ordered a shot of Glenmorangie single malt. It was around 7 o'clock when I arrived, and approximately an hour later, a lively group of women from a bachelorette party claimed a cluster of reserved tables. Their group comprised roughly 15 individuals, and they were exuding quite a bit of energy. Intrigued, I opted to stay a while longer, enjoying the spectacle, and ordered a meal to be served at the bar. Predictably, the bride-to-be commanded the spotlight, a fetching young woman of approximately 25 years old, with cascading light brown locks and expressive brown eyes. Admittedly, I have a soft spot for long hair, so I found myself captivated by her, focusing on her for several minutes before diverting my attention to the rest of the party. It was then that I noticed her counterpart, a woman I estimated to be around 40 years old. Judging by her demeanor, she appeared to be the designated chaperone for the evening. The older guardian brought along to oversee the antics of both the innocent and not-so-innocent younger attendees. Upon first observation, she appeared somewhat restless in her mid-thigh-length black skirt, which appeared to be creeping up her legs as she sat. She attempted to readjust it several times in the initial moments, albeit unsuccessfully. I couldn't help but smile inwardly. She indeed possessed attractive legs. Moreover, she seemed to possess a prominent bosom, not entirely concealed beneath the snug lavender silk blouse she wore. The blouse boasted a modest V-neck, its neckline descending, revealing her seldom sun-exposed alabaster skin. Her ensemble, perhaps lenient towards a younger demographic than she, might typically opt for, suggesting it might have been curated by one of the younger women in the group. I silently commended whoever selected and encouraged her to wear it. The women appeared to be thoroughly enjoying themselves, engaged in laughter, libations, and refreshments. As a three-piece ensemble commenced playing, several women rose to dance with one another. This display of women dancing together seemed to embolden other men in the bar, who gradually approached the women on the dance floor and those seated at tables, except for their chaperone. After waiting for approximately 10 minutes without anyone approaching the chaperone, I determined it was safe and approached her. With her dark brown shoulder-length hair and bright green eyes, she reminded me of Jacqueline Bessa during her prime. Equally significant was the absence of a wedding ring on her finger. She blushed a lovely shade of pink when I invited her to dance. Initially hesitant, she eventually agreed, despite receiving teasing remarks from nearby younger women as she stood up, adjusted her skirt, and took my hand. The first two dances were lively, and I silently thanked my ex-wife for insisting I learn how to dance. The subsequent dance was slow, and I was pleasantly surprised when she leaned into me. Her hair carried the scent of white shoulders, which amused me as it's not typically favored by younger women. We engaged in conversation as we moved across the dance floor. I learned her name was Kathleen Franks. She was the bride's aunt, and she served as the group's chaperone. After thanking me for the dances, Kathleen began to leave the dance floor following the slow dance. However, I held onto her hand and invited her to join me at the bar. She initially protested, citing the need to watch her girls, but I pointed out that she could still keep an eye on them from our vantage point at the bar. We observed the younger women and engaged in conversation. It came to my attention that she was actually 48 years old and had gone through a divorce after a 15-year marriage. She shared with me that her ex-husband, a wealthy man, had replaced her with a younger wife who was 27 at the time of their marriage 3 years ago. She also mentioned that her attire was chosen by her niece, the bride, and she felt it was a bit youthful for her usual conservative style. I expressed my opinion that her outfit suited her perfectly, and I may have indulged in some flattery when I praised her attractive heels. Over the years, I had learned that women often appreciated compliments on their shoes. "Do you think I look out of place in this outfit?" she asked innocently. "Not at all. Excuse my directness, but you look absolutely stunning." If I had appreciated her pink blush earlier, I was even more enamored by the deep red blush she displayed now. We chatted for approximately 15 minutes. She observed that I wasn't wearing a wedding ring and was curious about the story behind it. She seemed surprised when I mentioned that my ex-wife had never physically cheated on me. "I'm quite traditional," I clarified. She betrayed me emotionally and was planning to do so physically. I couldn't trust her anymore. "You can't claim to love someone while desiring someone else sexually." "I understand," she responded. "Everyone has their own boundaries." A few minutes later, she returned to the bridal party table, but she was still open when I asked her to dance again about 30 minutes later. This time, after we finished, she took my hand and guided me back to the table where the other women were seated, now joined by several other men. The evening turned out to be a success from my perspective, despite the lively behavior of some of the younger women. I was pleasantly surprised when Kathy asked me to be her date at the wedding in 2 weeks. I was originally planning to attend solo, but I believe I'd have a better time with you. Although we've only just met, you've already acquainted yourself with many of the other guests who will be present, she explained. Plus, it would be a huge favor to me because I really wouldn't want to be there alone, looking terribly pathetic. I certainly wouldn't want you to feel that way. I'd be more than happy to accompany you to the wedding, I replied. Just let me know what color you'll be wearing, and I'll select a suit that complements it. She leaned in and planted a quick kiss on my lips. "Ooh la la," teased some voices from the end of the table. I grinned, while Kathy blushed once more. I could definitely get used to that. While not dancing, I sat with Kathy. At one point, as we were seated, I found myself keeping a watchful eye on the bachelorette party attendees, some of whom were visibly overindulging in alcohol. Given that I am the father of a teenage girl, it was only natural for me to adopt a protective stance. My attention was drawn when I observed a young man guiding one of the girls towards the restroom. Politely excusing myself from the table, I swiftly and discreetly intervened, arriving just in time to intercept the young man before he could usher the girl into the men's restroom. The young man regarded me with contempt, evidently unimpressed by an older gentleman in formal attire. Granted, at 5'11" and 175 pounds, I hardly strike fear into anyone at first glance. Nevertheless, I'd like to believe I'm still in decent physical condition, having endured my fair share of hardships in my youth. Sometimes readiness for unexpected confrontations is necessary to do what's right, like protecting a young girl from becoming a victim of that boy. I'd hope someone would intervene to shield my own daughter if the situation demanded it. "Let go of my hand and back off, old-timer," he snarled at me. "She's old enough to handle herself if she wants to." I let go of his hand, but with my other hand I held his head tightly and slammed it hard against the wall next to the door. The impact was strong enough to crack the drywall, which apparently stunned him. Suddenly his confidence seemed to wane, and he loosened his grip on the girl. It seemed like he didn't want to escalate the conflict anymore. The atmosphere in the club quieted down as bystanders noticed the quarrel. As soon as I started taking Alicia back to the bachelorette party, Katie and the rest of our group came up to us, took the woman by the hands, and escorted her back to the table. I found myself face to face with the restaurant manager and other employees, fearing that I might be reprimanded. To my surprise, the manager reached out and thanked me for intervening and helping the young woman. "The authorities have been contacted. This individual is being taken into custody. They will likely request your details and your version of events, but I believe you have nothing to worry about. By the way, your drinks for the remainder of the evening are complimentary. Thank you once again," he stated. "Wow, that was quite the ordeal," remarked Wanda, the bride-to-be, as I returned to the table. "Thank you for being attentive to more than just Aunt Kathy." "How did you spot that?" Kathy inquired. "I'm supposed to be keeping an eye out, but I was completely oblivious. I feel terrible about it." "Don't blame yourself. It's easy to lose track of 14 girls in a bar if you're not a professional security guard or a dad. Dads, well, most of us, possess what I like to call dad vision. I engaged in conversation and banter with the ladies at the table until they decided to move elsewhere for the rest of their evening. Saying goodnight, I shared a gentle kiss with Kathy, feeling pleased with myself and having her contact information saved in my phone. "Find a private space," one of the girls quipped, prompting laughter from the group. As I watched the women leave the restaurant, I lightly licked my lips, tasting Kathy's lipstick. Returning to my original spot at the bar with my drink, the bartender remarked, "Looks like things went well for you." "Who would have thought?" I replied with a laugh. "A bachelorette party? Give me one more drink to toast my good fortune before I leave." My newfound companion, seeing the bartender, received a generous $20 tip for the evening. Kathy donned a light blue dress for the wedding, so I opted for my dark blue pinstripe suit, which I consider my own-the-room attire. We appeared quite the dashing pair, much to the approval of several of her relatives. Throughout the wedding, numerous individuals approached me to express gratitude for watching over Alicia. Evidently, the bride had been recounting my deeds as if I were some sort of hero for the past 2 weeks. "Heroic and handsome, what a delightful combination," remarked Kathy's sister Donna Fulham, the mother of the bride, as she gracefully approached us to introduce herself before the ceremony. "Thank you for assisting the girls a few weeks back and for elevating my sister's taste in men." I had the chance to meet Kathy's 24-year-old daughter, Marissa, and her fiancé, Ben. Upon our introduction, Marissa remarked, "Well, at least one of my parents isn't searching for dates at an elementary school. If you stick around long enough to meet my dad, he's definitely not going to like you." By the end of the reception, I was confident that Kathy and I had a future together. I introduced her to my children a month later. While my son quickly warmed up to her, My daughter remained somewhat distant. She harbored some resentment towards me for divorcing her mother, despite her mother not having cheated on me. However, my son understood the situation. With his own serious girlfriend, we had a thorough conversation about fidelity and its importance to each of us one night. My wife, Kathy, and I entered retirement a few years back. To mark our 25th anniversary, we embarked on an Alaskan cruise. Using a daily keyless and astroglide, we engage in intimacy every morning before starting our day. At our stage in life, it's more about fostering a connection than purely physical intimacy. All 3 of our children have tied the knot and are thriving, blessing us with a total of 6 grandchildren. I've only had occasional conversations with my ex-wife since our divorce, mostly during our children's weddings and holiday gatherings. She's since remarried and divorced again, often attributing her circumstances to me. I never strayed during our marriage, she often asserts to our children. Some individuals simply failed to comprehend. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.